So my way of thinking then is, okay, if that's what's going to happen, then do I sort of take my investment and take it out and let the other bit ride and then it don't matter? Or do I let it drop where it could go even under my initial investment? And then I'm like, oh, you know what I mean? Now I'm losing money potentially,
Yeah.
with the hope of it going up. And it's greed. It comes down to greed then, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
it's also a really difficult game to play because if you've gotten into a position early enough and then you think to yourself, "Oh, well, I don't want to give that back," and but you also don't want to miss out on any further potential
Yeah,
upside, then when you sell it, you're going to have to pay 10 or 20% tax for capital
yeah,
gains on your profit. So then you need it to drop at least 20% just so you can not end up with a smaller stack after you've adjusted for tax. And at the moment, it hasn't been giving us dips bigger than 20% the whole way up. As I was saying a
yeah.
bit earlier on, the prior bull runs, we saw 30 and 40% pullbacks routinely. But now they've been sort of contained to 20%. And then it comes back to that same thing, doesn't it? If you want Bitcoin gains, you've got to put up with Bitcoin pullbacks and Bitcoin volatility. You've got to put up with the risk of Bitcoin. And it's a highly emotional market because it's so volatile.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
but I do think that getting a core position early enough to be able to just sort of weather the storm and give it the space to do whatever it's going to do, I think that's probably the best strategy.
Yeah, well, in pounds, I bought in the majority of my stuff at 22,000. So, I've definitely got leeway there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what
Yeah.
happens.
And in a way, I think that, if it is if the top already is in and it is going to crash now, well, then this cycle has failed. This will be the first time that it didn't convincingly break out above its all-time high and go on to set a significantly new higher price. And I don't think you could beat yourself up about that because you played the cycle how you're supposed to play it, right? You might have, the cycle didn't give the returns it should have or was expected to give, but I don't think we could be beating ourselves up just because, we didn't. If you sell at the all-time high, and then that happens to be the top, well, I mean, that would be the first time we've ever seen that for Bitcoin, right? Most of the
Mm.
time, you see Bitcoin break through the all-time high, make a significantly higher high, and that's what we're here for, right? We're here for these outsized returns, but you have to weather the volatility on the way. So it's a tough one. I understand that, but like I said, the issue is if you start to sell now and try to get quote unquote cute with your position, then you risk selling only to get locked out of a monster move and then have to pay tax. And then you've turned your what would have been an outsized gain using a highly volatile instrument like Bitcoin into a mediocre gain. And then you've got to pay a massive tax bill as well. So,
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
but to each their own, right?
Hmm.
But what you're doing now, Cobra,
Absolutely.
is you're earning your stripes for your first cycle. The reason I'm so
Yeah,
relaxed is
yeah.
because I've been through a few of these. So it gets easier with time. It definitely
Well,
gets easier with time.
that's what I'm saying. Yourself and CPM have been through so many of these cycles, so you're a bit more calm and all that lot. Where someone who's new into Bitcoin, like myself, is like, what the hell is going on? I was up loads and now it's starting to drop. And is it going to go back up? And yeah, so you have those little panic moments, which I'm sure you had when you saw your first cycles.
Oh yeah, for sure. I tell you what, the C19 one was wild, was absolutely wild because we went all the way back down to like 3K dollars
Oof.
in that crash, and that was after. So we put in a bottom at 3K, went up to about 14K in no time. Then we sort of consolidated that move, and then we crashed all the way back down to 3K. And at that moment in time, I have to admit, I can remember it quite well. I was thinking to myself, oh no, like Bitcoin has failed here. This Bitcoin's not supposed to be doing this. But it does Bitcoin things, right? It recovers, it figures itself out. And here we are at almost 70K dollars a few years
Yeah,
later. So happy days.
fair play. Thank you.
So
So
yeah,
for
hold in there, bro. Hold in there.
I will, I will. I'll hang in there for a moment.
CPM still there? You fall asleep, CPM?
Yeah, well, I'm just here. I'm just here just to, as and when, just say something here and there. Guys, welcome to the What Bitcast. I just thought I'd let these guys just carry on their conversation. And that's what I love about this. It's quite unique and it's pretty raw. And yeah, it's really cool. But welcome. We are on episode 9 of Two Swigs and a Cig. I'd like to welcome Camel Finance. Hi, Camel.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No worries at all. And Cobra Stacker.
Hey, brother, how you doing?
We've got a really lively podcast, hopefully. Well, it's up to you to make it lively. You used to. I'm sure you will. Before, just very briefly, the title of this podcast will be Is Faith and Belief Without Evidence? Oh, sorry. That's absolutely rubbish. And I should be reading it a little bit better. I'm going to put my glasses on. Oh, 1 second. Oh, that's better. Is faith a belief without evidence? So it's quite an interesting, in-depth thing. And this is a follow-up, really, from the back end of our last podcast, which we spent 15 minutes, obviously going down quite a big, quick rabbit hole. But it made me think, and it's a very interesting conversation you two were having just then, because within that conversation, we have to build up some sort of faith or belief in what we're doing in all aspects of life. And that when you were saying, Cobra, about, you don't worry about gold. Was that a faith thing, belief thing? Whereas with your Bitcoin, it's a new investment. Have you got that same conviction, faith, and belief? So that's why I said, is faith a belief without evidence? And tied in with that is when we look at faith and belief, are they the same? So we're going to talk around that. You can take it where you want. You can talk about faith or belief in whatever construct. I'll try and bring the narrative around that sort of constructual title. But before we go any further, Cobra, how you been doing? How's the auctions going?
I'm good, brother. The auctions are doing very well. Again, last night we had another auction. It was brilliant, apart from the fact that my internet was gone before I even started and I had to go back to basics with the phone. But yeah, great auction, great crowd. We had a really good laugh. I was downing a bottle of Baileys while I was doing it, which made me a bit more happier. So yeah, really good. Thanks.
Cool. And the sentiment within your gold and silver industry, from supplier to buyer?
Well, supplier to buyer. Well, my suppliers, they're still supplying. I'm still buying. And the guys in the auctions are still buying. There has been a change from the big collectible pieces at the moment, straight down into bullion. So I find the bullion is really flying out. The people who are really big into collectibles are still grabbing them, but even some of them are turning more to bullion at the moment. So I don't know if there's a fear there and they're trying to build their stacks, or there's just a lack of big finance out there to spend the massive premiums that are on some of the collectibles.
Cool. Brilliant. Camel, you around? I see you.
Yeah, I'm here, mate. I'm here.
Oh, cool. How you getting on? That was today, mate. That was a great deep dive you did today.
Thanks. Yeah,
just you stick a ton of work into those things. I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They take a while. They take a while to put together. Constantly asking myself questions, and when we get little pullbacks and stuff like we got with Bitcoin, for example, then it brings into question, doesn't it? It brings into question: is it going to continue to play ball as expected, or is it going to do something different? But I mean, the hypothesis has been tested multiple times on the way up, and so far so good. So hopefully that continues. But if it doesn't, then we know where the invalidation is, right? And we'll just have to adjust as the new data presents itself. But so far it seems okay.
Good. And sentiment. I mean, you obviously use Twitter a lot. I'm trying to use it a little bit, as you probably noticed, but I just play around and I'm stupid on it, really.
Yeah, it's manic depressive. It swings really violently. I think the sentiment at the moment is very, very soured, because even though Bitcoin is only off its highs something like 12%, so a lot of those altcoins are down significantly more. Many of them have been down 40, 50%, and a handful of them, or even more than a handful, are down 80 or 90%. So yeah, a lot of people sort of obviously, if you've decided to play altcoins instead and you were sitting on some nice gains, and then all of a sudden those have pulled back 80%, that doesn't feel good. and when it doesn't feel good, people tend to lash out. And so I think sentiment has been well and truly destroyed. But then again, we are due a cycle low, and that's what those cycle lows serve to do. So I would imagine we're about to run it back turbo, I think, but that's to be determined, of course.
Absolutely. Which brings us on to a great subject this week, faith and belief. So I'm going to ask Cobra to kick this one off. I would like you to talk about how you see faith plays a part in life as a rule.
Okay, well, if you look at life, if you look at what we've been talking about, say with Bitcoin or gold or whatever, and you say, well, is faith based on evidence or not? Well, I have faith in Bitcoin, but I have faith because I'm ignorant to the cycles of Bitcoin. Whereas I would say Camel has evidence of the cycles and how they've been, and therefore doesn't need faith in Bitcoin. He has evidence which guides him through knowing from what's happened in the past, what will possibly happen in the future. So I think faith, a lot of times, or especially blind faith, is based on ignorance. If you don't know about something, then you need faith to believe in something. So that's how I would look at that question that you asked earlier, that you need faith when you're ignorant to the facts. When you know the facts, you don't need faith.
Okay, cool. And what do you mean? What's your definition of blind?
Well, blind faith, I mean, I would put that into mainly a religious perspective. When you look at religions and all this stuff, you'll have people who will be born into a family, let's say of Christians or Muslims or whatever it may be. And because they are brought up with something, they believe in it emphatically. And they're blinkered to any other possibility. In fact, many times they'll close their mind to any other possibility, and so it's blind faith. They have no evidence of a God. They have no evidence of certain things that were written down 2,000 plus years ago, or in the case of Islam, 1,600 years ago, and they believe it blindly.
Cool. What about you, Camel?
I think, yeah, faith implies that you don't have necessarily as much evidence versus belief. I think I would agree with Cobra, implies you've got some evidence for that. With Bitcoin or gold, for example, I wouldn't say I have. I mean, I guess I have belief in both to some degree based on my experience, but I would say largely speaking, it is a faith move, right? I've got faith that Bitcoin will do Bitcoin things. I've got faith that gold will continue to be the base layer of money for the central banks. But and I've got some evidence to back that up if we look at history, for example, or prior cycles. But I think there is definitely a faith component there, right? Because there's no way of knowing if they're going to continue to move higher. So yeah, I think it's an interesting question. It's a mixture of both, perhaps. And I think with religion, I think what some people interpret as faith or blind faith, as Cobra says, I think isn't quite the whole picture, because for a lot of people that have a religion, regardless of what religion that is, they have ample evidence in their own personal experience to back that up. So I can see the argument for saying it's blind faith, but then the inverse of that, in my own experience at least, is very, very different. Like if I pray, I often get prayers answered almost immediately, or and that certainly reinforces that there's signs that seem way too unlikely to be just pure coincidence. And again, if you experience these, then it probably leans more on the belief side with your own personal evidence or experience versus a blind faith. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting question.
Well, sorry, CPM, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to pass it over to you again, mate.
Okay. Well, in that way of thinking, Camel, do you believe that may I ask you what religion you are?
I lean towards Christianity the most, yeah.
And any particular type? Are you Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox?
I was brought up Church of England, but
right.
I consider myself, it's like a weird way to put it, but I consider myself more of an esoteric Christian these days.
my ignorance, esoteric means?
It means that I don't necessarily go to church. I don't necessarily have to read the Bible so much. I'm not like super into that kind of thing, but I do believe in a God. I lean more towards that as a religion. Um, but I'm not sort of, you wouldn't call me an Orthodox Christian, I don't think.
So you would, I presume, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you would say that Christianity is the correct religion. It's the correct way to believe in God.
I think there's one God and there's just different ways of interpreting it. I wouldn't say that it's a right or a wrong religion. I wouldn't say that. I know that's when I said I lean more on like esoteric Christian, it's because I know if I go to my local church, there'll be people in there that will say things like, "Oh, all Muslims are going to hell," for example.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I don't subscribe to this idea at all, right? And I even know people in the church that will say, "Oh, well, even if the Catholics, they're all wrong. They're all going to hell."
Yes.
Anyone
Yeah.
that's an atheist, they're going straight to hell. And I don't really see it that way personally. I don't think that's what it is. I think you're put in the position you are put in by a creator, and I don't really think that all of these religions are wrong apart from one. That's just
Which one?
that doesn't sit right with me personally. So
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah.
that's what I mean when I say like I lean more on Christianity because I was raised a Christian. I then
Right.
had a significant period in my life, many years, where I had no religion and embraced atheism, and then I sort of slowly came back to it over time. Um, but like I said, a lot of it doesn't sit right with me. A lot of it, I see a lot of people that say, "Oh, everything in the Bible is absolutely perfect." But I mean, for example, the Book of Revelation at the end of the Bible has been appended.
Yes.
Books have been taken out of the Bible,
Absolutely.
and it's not true of only the Bible; it's true of other religious texts as well.
Agreed.
And so I have a hard time personally picking up a Bible and saying everything in here is 100% perfect and flawless, and everyone that doesn't subscribe to this or reads a different book is completely missing the point and going to hell. So, and I know when I say this sort of thing, it upsets a lot of Christians. A lot of Christians say that's false doctrine or whatever. But
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I have my own relationship with my own creator. I do definitely believe in a creator. Um, and yeah, it's kind of a weird one, but because like I said, I know for a fact if I go to my local church, well, I'll disagree with a lot of people in there, and a lot of them will think that I shouldn't be allowed to have these opinions. But I would argue to some degree that's almost like a control mechanism in a way, and I don't really subscribe to that as an idea.
Well, we actually agree on a lot in what you've just said. We really do. Um, you know, the thing is, I want to say before we really get deep into this conversation, for everyone out there, that I respect all religions and I respect all points of view. So there's nothing to say that I'm completely right or you're completely right or someone else is wrong, and I'll never say that. So I'll always respect all religions. In the same token, I do have some very strong ideas of where religion fits into humanity. So, for instance, I look back in time and I say to myself, well, first of all, when we go back, we know that people prayed to thunder, lightning, fire, volcanoes, water, elements that were strong and they couldn't explain it. And so they had the god of fire, they had a god of whatever, lightning, Thor, whatever it was, with Thor's hammer making thunder, etc., etc. And as we grew and we learned scientifically and it learned to explain things, because remember, in those times, we couldn't explain these things, and so we attributed it to a god. But as we went through time and we learnt more, those certain sections went out. So God as a god of fire or a god of lightning was not needed no more because we could start to explain these things. And to me, people like Jesus or Muhammad would have been, or anyone else, don't get me wrong, Buddha or Krishna in the Hindu religion, were good people of their time who maybe saw what was going on in their area and tried to preach to people a good way to live life. Now, to get people to listen, you need an element of reward and fear. And that is where I believe like things like heaven and hell come into it. If I stood there and tried to tell people how to live their lives today, people would basically say, piss off, who are you? But if I said, look, I'm the son of God and there's a reward and a risk, especially in those times of still illiteracy and not a high knowledge of science. So modern day, we've got a lot more knowledge of science and a lot more explanations. In those sort of times, there would be a following. And we even see it in America now with cult religions. Cult religions will prey on people who are weak, who are going through bad times with their family or anything else, and they will put a doctrine in there and people will start to follow it. And they can follow it to a point where they believe it so much, mass suicides happen and all that sort of stuff. And the Bible, the Quran, the Guru Granth Sahib, the Vedas are written by men. And this is where my problem comes in, where people say, well, the Bible's the word of God. Well, is it? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, you said quite a lot there. I also have a similar tough time when it comes to these religious texts because there's so many of them. With that said, many of them overlap from different perspectives, right? And many, like for example, the like Jesus from the Bible is a beloved prophet in Islam. So there's and a bunch of them have very similar stories or even different accounts of the same story. So I think there has to be some element of truth to them. I don't think they're just completely make believe and some guy wrote them as a control mechanism. I do believe there is a spiritual component and more truth than lies in most of those texts. And if not direct truth, even as allegorical truth, I think that most probably there are some lessons in there that are very, very useful in implementing in your life. I think that there's probably a lot of knowledge in those textbooks that you can apply in your life and will improve your life. I believe a lot of what's in them pertains to natural law and sort of karma. I know you're not a big believer in karma, but I'm convinced that karma exists, and I'm sure that that is an awful lot of when you see this thing like love thy neighbor in the Bible and do unto others as you would do unto yourself and all of this kind of thing. I really do believe that they had this understanding of these sort of natural and karmic laws, and that is some of what the motive behind these texts are, to sort of share that. When it comes to science is a very weird one because I noticed that you were quick to sort of say, well, we have explanations for these things, but science is kind of strange in and of itself because everything is kind of just an idea or a theory until someone proves it wrong. And even some of our most widely accepted ideas in science are actually based very loosely in reality. And most people just aren't qualified. They don't have enough science background to understand where the things start to get a bit spurious and where they start to fall apart or where they start to seem like they're what's the word? Not as concrete as most people would have you believe. So I would say that science, in a way, is also a faith and belief system because whilst people sort of accept that there's this idea that science is conducted in a special way by very intelligent people that that do the thing to get the right result and it's repeatable and it's evidence based, but a lot of science is very, very corrupted, very, very corrupted, and a lot of science is motivated by where the funding comes from or who funds it. And so then you end up in this weird world where we trust the science, but the science has been corrupted an awful lot. And thus, I would say that science, in to some extent at least, is a faith and belief system for sure.
I don't know. I don't know if I quite agree with that for the simple reason that, yes, I understand when you talk about scientists, say with big farmers and like pharmaceuticals and all that lot. Yes, it's based on money and all that sort of stuff. But also, the development of science is because you're right. It will start as a theory, and then they will work on that theory to get to the truth of it. So they will have a theory, for instance, and it is the big scientists. You're absolutely correct. Will have a theory and then they will work towards proving that theory. Now, if during that time they disprove the theory, then that theory is put aside and another theory may be put forward or may run concurrent. But science is evidence-based because all the developments we've had through the centuries has come through science and observation and testing, and that is evidence. So you're not basing science on a faith. Now, when you look at the world or the universe even, and you can't explain things, in a religious point of view, you'll attribute it to God, which you also cannot explain. So to explain one thing, you attribute it to something else you can't explain. Whereas with science, when you can't explain something, you keep searching for the truth. Once you get into religion, because a lot of people follow these religions so blindly, everything is attributed to God. Well, that's the will of God. Well, that's because of God. You close yourself off to learning the truth. So I believe that religion restricts truth, whereas science looks for evidential truth. Don't get me wrong. What you also said about religion was very true. A lot of the religions are interlinked. Now, Islam, for instance, started 400 years after Christianity. And to convert people or to make people believe, when a lot of the world, well, not a lot of the world, but there was a large portion of the world that believed in Christianity, you would have to accept that Jesus was a prophet. But what they do then is to say, well, Jesus was a prophet, but Muhammad was the last prophet. And so the word of Muhammad is the final word of God. So there's many crossovers with many religions and many civilizations from thousands of years old, not just centuries, thousands of years old, in language and in beliefs. You look at the flood stories. The flood stories are repeated in many, 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 many religions and books. But then when we look scientifically, we know about the polar flip, the polar caps flipping, 45 degrees. We know that it happened 11,500 BC. We know that it happened 6,500 BC. We know that we're overdue for one now. And when that happens, the polar caps and the sea and the air will carry on moving, but the Earth stops during the flip, which causes mass flooding. So we've seen it happen at least 5 times, and we can see the evidence through science, carbon dating, marks in the ground, all sorts of things to show these mass floods. Now, these are explained in different cultures and religions as the will of God, as in a punishment from God. So religion, where it can't explain something, will write it down as the will of God. What is God? We don't even know what God is. We can't give an explanation of God, and we can't even comprehend the sort of powers of God to be able to. So you are literally trying to define something you don't understand with something else you don't understand. And that's where it falls down for me.
Well, I would push back on this and say that science falls down in the same way. Like you mentioned carbon dating. Carbon dating is complete BS. Complete BS. It doesn't work. And I know this because I did it at university. And even when they were teaching us, they were saying that it's got an error factor of like, so bad that it doesn't work. It's completely useless. And there are many, many examples of this. And I think for me personally, I mean, I'd be curious to get your opinion on this. Do you believe in the Big Bang Theory for the creation of the universe?
So the Big Bang Theory, now, the thing is, again, we are not, I say we like I'm some big scientist. I'm not, so please forgive me for that. But when I talk, I generally talk on scientific views. Look, the Big Bang Theory is a theory, number one. Now, we can see that the universe is expanding. We actually thought that the expansion was slowing down, but recently it was discovered that it's actually speeding up. That gives us evidence of if it's expanding, did it come from one point in the beginning? And then we talk about matter and antimatter. Well, a lot of religious people will say, well, how can you create something from nothing? But then we have the big, what are they called? Not kaleidoscope. Thank you. Where they tried to produce antimatter and they did it for a mega split second. And it's a very dangerous experiment to do in the first place. But they're working towards understanding it. So the Big Bang is a theory, like you said. Do you believe in the Big Bang Theory? I believe that there is some evidence to show us that there was some sort of explosion. I don't believe it came from nothingness of nothingness. But then you'll say, well, what was before it? Or, what created what was there that exploded? So again, we're learning. We didn't understand thunder and lightning, as I say, back in the day. And we attributed that to God. We understand now how thunder and lightning works. So we don't attribute it to God anymore. As in, you may say, well, it's the whole creation of God and all the rest of it, and so that's why it works. But we actually know how it works. So this is what I'm trying to say. Just because we don't understand the actual formation of the universe as it is now, then it doesn't mean we can't search for that truth. So yeah, and as far as carbon dating goes, bruv, yes, there's there may be a degree of error in it, but they still are using carbon dating, and it can still give you some sort of measure of time, maybe not accurately, as in you
But
can't
then
say
what
it was.
uses it? What uses it
Well,
if it's not?
because you can still look at carbon dating to say something was older than something else, or something would have been around this sort of time. Whereas, you can't go, yeah, it was 22 years ago that happened, or it was 352 years ago that happened. But you can put it in a period of time. And that is how we get Jurassic and Triassic and, all the different periods of time and all that sort of stuff, through understanding layers of the earth, through understanding carbon dating and all that. So yes, you may be right. There's a margin of error in it, and maybe a slightly big one, maybe 5%, 10%, 20%, but it still gives you some sort of timeline.
Yeah, I would push back again and just say that it's the error margin on carbon dating. It essentially makes it useless. And I know we can agree or disagree on that forever in time, but
Of course, but why do they still use it then? Why do they still use it?
Okay,
It's such a known fact.
let me answer your question with another question. Why is it that pharmaceutical companies are allowed to push drugs that are known to be neither safe nor effective?
Because we are
Right.
greedy,
Right.
bloody idiot
And
humans,
it's the
and that
same
is
deal.
greed.
It's the same deal that they fund
But how does
the
carbon
research that
dating
they
help us greedily? Like,
because
as
it's
in,
because it's anti-God, because it speaks to a universe that is older than it is.
Guys, can I just jump in here a second?
Yeah.
What just because it's this is bloody hard for me because I would want to jump in with my own opinion, but it's fascinating and great. But we just give each other a little bit of space just to answer,
yes,
answer or say what we're going to say. That's all. Sorry.
of course.
Sure.
Camel?
Yeah. So, and I mean, going back to I think the Big Bang is a really good example. I'll give you a couple other examples as well, right? But the reason I asked you about the Big Bang is because, yeah, I know you acknowledged it's a theory, but it represents for me the egregiousness of science in that they say, oh, we've got all this evidence that shows the universe is expanding. And if we wind back time, we eventually find it all vibrating on the head of a pin now of nothingness and blah, blah, blah. But this is why science to me is so obnoxious, because what we're essentially saying is I've got a theory that does not mean anything. It doesn't work at all, right? Unless you give me one assumption. And that one assumption happens to be the biggest assumption of all time, in that suddenly there was nothing, right? Everything came out of the head of a pin vibrating in space. And that to me is so obnoxious to say, I've got a really good theory, but you just have to give me one assumption. And that one assumption just makes absolutely no sense in my mind whatsoever. It seems far more likely that there was a creator, or that we live in a simulated environment and someone pushed go. That seems far more likely than everything was vibrating on the head of a pin in the middle of nowhere, and it was so condensed, and all of the matter we have in our universe came out of that. But there are so many of these examples, right? I gave you the example of the pharmaceutical industry where they push things because they get funding. I believe they do the same thing with carbon dating because they want people to think that the universe is older than it is. There are also narratives being pushed for climate change, for example. Anyone can disprove the whole melting the ice caps makes the sea levels rise. Okay, very, very simply, if you put in your kitchen a measuring jug of water, stick some ice in it, okay, take the measurement and then walk away and let the ice melt. And when you come back, the sea level or the water liquid level in the measuring jug does not rise because it displaces in 1-to-1. Anyone can disprove this.
No. I must stop you on that, please, if I may, right? What you're forgetting is the amount of ice which is above water, bruv. Okay, so it's not the same as an ice in a glass of water, not at all. You see, the ice in a glass of water, as you say, is in the water, whereas the ice caps and the amount over the Arctic and the Antarctic is above the sea. When it melts, it goes into the sea. It doesn't displace. It doesn't just match each other out. That's absolute rubbish.
Yeah, but you can find time lapses that go back into the 1800s of coastline, and the sea level hasn't budged. The sea level hasn't budged. Also, you can look at the flow.
We're seeing raises in sea level even now.
No, we're not. We're not, Cobra. We're not. This is my point. This is where it comes back to faith and belief, right? Scientists, most people don't have enough science knowledge to understand this stuff, but the sea level's not rising. For example, if you take the conservative estimates, then in 10 to 15 years, right, most of Southern America is going to be underwater. London's going to be gone. right? These places, Barclays would not give you a 40-year mortgage to put a property
No,
in riverfront in London, right? And they've been telling us for like 3 or 4 decades that we're going to run out of fossil fuels if we don't immediately convert to electric, right? And they also tell us that oil comes from compressed fossilized dinosaurs all under this massive pressure. It doesn't. It's bullshit. It all comes. It's a naturally replenishing substance. We couldn't burn all the crude oil if we tried. We literally couldn't burn it all. And they feed and popularize these ideas, just like they do with the pharmaceutical industry. They say, oh, you need this. It's safe and effective. And all the funding is all skewed because they want to push this entire narrative on the planet. And there's so many of these examples. And
I totally disagree. I totally disagree. I can't disagree more. And I'll tell you for why. Look, the pharmaceuticals is a totally different thing. That is a man-made, that's not, discovering science of the world and the universe and et cetera, and et cetera, et cetera. We're not talking about God. We've had many medicines and all that lot that have come which do save lives, absolutely, constantly. Our length of living is longer. Absolutely, they bring out rubbish, which is money making, all that. That's the greed of man. That's a totally different subject. But when you start telling me that there's an infinite amount of oil and it's always replenishing, no, I don't believe that at all. I'm not saying it's going to run out tomorrow, not at all. And you can't measure the sea levels over 15 years and go, by this time America's going to be underwater and England's going to be underwater and all that lot. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking over decades and centuries, and you see a drop and you see a rise, and it all depends on what's going on in the world. Now, I'm not going to dismiss everything to just say, well, they're doing all of this just to get rid of God, just to get rid of the belief in God. No, I don't believe that at all. We have evidence of 5 phases that the Earth has gone through, of total ice ages, of total being underwater. This is how man traveled. The tectonic plates, there was once one continent, one big continent. Tectonic plates have moved, which has separated countries. You can even see, or continents, sorry, you can even see where they matched up at one point. But when they separated, there was also ice, mass ice across the world. And we have evidence of that again, right? Which shows where people could have crossed into different areas. And we can see cultures crossing over. And languages which have crossed over through these sort of things. There's so much evidence for all this, which you're just dispelling. You're going, no, that's absolute crap. Now, let me ask you something. You're saying that it was, when they talk about fossils and all that, you're basically saying that dinosaurs didn't exist. Is that your belief?
I didn't say that.
But is that your belief?
I don't think so, no.
You don't believe that dinosaurs existed. You know why you don't?
No. I don't think that's my belief. I don't think that's my belief. I don't know.
Okay.
It seems more likely they existed than they didn't, but
right. But a lot of Christians will turn around and say they didn't exist. And even Jehovah's Witnesses, when you confront them with it, will say that was the test of God to put these fossils in the ground to see if we still believe in him. The other reason is because a lot of Christians will say that the world is only 6,500 years old. And let me ask you, do you believe that?
I don't know.
Or the universe is only 6,500 years old?
I don't know. I have no evidence one way or the other for this stuff. That's the thing.
But then we can look at evidences, like, for instance, how long it takes light to travel from one source to the other, right? We can look at how far a sun is away. We can measure the time that it takes for the light of a sun to reach the Earth. We can see when a sun explodes, how long it would have taken for that light to reach us, and work out that it is millions, if not billions of years.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned light, because that is a universally accepted constant, right? Except it's not. This is what I mean by how BS science is, right? There's areas in the universe where the speed of light has been observed to be different speeds to what we track it here on Earth. And the science community know about this. They just keep it quiet because it messes up all their calculations. But there's literature paperwork printed on this, right? This caused me to have a meltdown for days when I found out about it many, many years ago. So we sit here and we pretend, again, like the scientists are all smart and they're all out there trying to find the correct and truest theories. But they know it's BS. They know the speed of light is not a constant everywhere in the universe, but they treat it as if it is. All of our calculations are based as if this is a universal constant, but it's not. They know it's BS, and you can find the literature that proves this. So it goes back to this same idea of why would we assume that just because, one area of science, like the pharmaceutical industry, is corrupt, we're okay with that. But we've got, a huge issue with saying that the space study or astrology or whatever is not corrupt. That couldn't possibly be, and neither could physics, and neither could, like, you know, whatever else, all these other fields. Why are we okay with saying that one area could be corrupted, but the environmental side, that couldn't possibly be, right? I mean, they've got more motivation to corrupt the climate data, right, than than the pharmaceutical industry does. They want to bring in like a tyranny and a carbon credit system where they get to fly around on their jets and their private yachts all the time, burning infinite amounts of fossil fuels, and everyone else has to have a smart meter in their home to track whether or not they left their TV on at night so that they can have less universal basic income for damaging the planet. There's never been a bigger financial incentive for these people to lie about the climate change data. And yet we know, based on records, the hottest day in the UK was over 150 years ago. And you turn on the BBC and they'll be happy to tell you it gets hotter and hotter every year. But the Great Stink was 150 years ago, and that was the hottest day, and we haven't come close to it. So I don't know, man. I think it's kind of strange to say that you acknowledge the corruption and greedy humans in one area, but not in these other areas. And in my experience, and that corruption goes absolutely everywhere.
No, but look, you're conflating two different things. When you look at the corruption, say, in the environment and all that, like, yes, it could be for oil reasons, it could be for financial reasons. Again, I'm telling you the same thing. Look at where we've developed the Industrial Revolution, the Iron Revolution, all the times we look at AI now, which will be a next revolution. This is all due to science. It's not down to God. It's not because God has created the whole thing and now he's creating AI. This is all due to human science and knowledge and the persistent looking for that knowledge. Now, you can do basic experiments yourself. You don't need a science to tell you the speed of light or the speed of sound. Have you ever seen the experiment where, you know, they'll fire a gun and the bullet will take a certain time, the sound will take a certain time to reach it, or even like when a bang is made further away, you can see the person hit the drum, but you don't hear. So you're seeing the light of that person banging the drum, but you don't hear the noise till after. So we can measure speeds. Now, if you and me, wanted to do these experiments and had a bit of knowledge to work out the speeds, we could do it ourselves. And yes, light might bend in an atmosphere, light might travel slightly differently in space, but it's still a phenomenal speed. And then when you start measuring it against suns, which are billions of miles away, you can work out, even if you want to go with your argument, there is no way that the universe has only been here 6,500 years. What it is, that the keepers of a religion, and this is what I call them, the keepers of a religion, have to go with the thing of Adam and Eve and the generations who came after. And to fit that narrative, we have to say they were 6,500 years old. But you can look at even Stone Age paintings and stuff like that. Well, there's no talk of that in the Bible. There's no talk of that at all. You're basing it all on the Bible. Well, you can go all over the world and see different things. What was the name of the map that was written 11,500 BC, right? Which showed the land masses under the Antarctic, right? The Pierce Rice map, I think it was called. And the reason for that was because it was land at that time. It wasn't covered with ice because the polar things were at a different position. And we even have to adjust our GPS satellites every year for the shift in the polar position. So I'm sorry, but there is so much evidence. And if you want to just say that all science is fake and all science is to dispel God, I totally disagree, because you and me wouldn't even be talking now on this phone if we didn't have some faith in science. We wouldn't have all the technology we've got if we didn't believe in science. So if we want to dispel it all and just go, yeah, you know what? I believe in something that I have no idea about, and I don't want to look any further, and I don't want to scientifically make any progress because this thing above has turned around and said, this is the will of God. No, I can't agree with that, brother. And you can bring as many conspiracy theories as you want in to basically say, yeah, all science is rubbish. I can't agree with that.
No, I don't think you fully understood what I'm saying. I'm not saying all science is rubbish and all science is anti-God. That is not what I'm saying. That obviously we are, like you said, we're using internet right now. We're communicating via things that were built on science. I'm not disputing that. I'm not saying that science doesn't exist, right? I hold a science degree, as you know. I worked in a science industry for a while. I did real science. I understand what science is. That's not what I'm saying. I'm by no means saying that all science is fake and all science is anti-God. But I don't see the reason why we can't have a creator of a universe and observe some of the laws inside of that universe. I don't understand why there has to be this or that, why we can't have a God and science. And what I am saying emphatically is that much of the science that we just accept to be true has been corrupted. So it's not that I'm saying that all science is anti-God. It's not that I'm saying all science is anti-God or all science is fake, but a lot of it, I would argue, is a strangely weird faith and belief system, because a lot of people, like I said, they don't truly understand. They just trust the science, right? They don't truly understand how deep the corruption goes. They don't truly understand that many things are pushed on us just so that later in life these people can make a killing. And I mean, that's not me saying that we don't have calculations that hold up. That's not me saying that the chemistry I learned as a student many years ago, like, mixing A plus B can give you C repeatably. And so I'm not saying that science doesn't exist. But what I am saying is there's a large amount of corruption around it. And I don't see the reason why God couldn't have created a universe in which we happen to notice some of the laws and sciences that apply within his created universe. I don't understand why that is an issue personally.
Okay, but brother, this is the thing that I'm trying to say to you, right? Okay, so we're on a similar thing of science, right? Absolutely, there's corruption in science. I'm not disputing that, brother, but I'm doing that in a way of man is greedy, and I'm not talking about the common man. I'm talking about man at a higher level is greedy, right? So they will use evidence, or they will use, or even lie about evidence to tell the truth, to gain money or to gain something they want to gain, or to keep oil being used for whatever reason or whatever it may be. Yes, I agree with you, brother. But the basic fundamentals of science, you and I, if we had a little bit of understanding, could go out and do those experiments and work it out for ourselves. But when we come to religion, right, if I asked you one simple question, you would have no answer for me because you cannot explain it. So you're talking about us believing in things that we don't understand and we can't explain. But if I said to you, what is God? What's your answer?
The creator of the universe.
But that's a circular answer. It's what is God? What is God?
Well, I don't know.
Exactly my point, brother. And no one does. So you're attributing everything you believe in into something you don't know. And if you want to talk about corruption, bruv, let's just look at the religions and how corrupt they have been. The original Old Testament would turn around and agree with slavery. It would agree with beating your woman. You know what I mean? It had so many negative connotations in it. The New Testament, as you said yourself, was changed and developed and all that. And it had to develop. The original Old Testament of the Bible couldn't explain scientifically things like the earth and whether it was flat or round or the sun going round it or, the earth spinning. It couldn't give you any of that. We learnt it and the Bible had to be changed. And that's my point. If it's the word of God sent down by God, it would never have to be changed. And there would only be one word. There wouldn't be God knows how many different religions with different things. Look at Hinduism. Hinduism believes in one God with reincarnated gods, many gods, hundreds of gods. Do you know what I mean? So where do we, you go Greek mythology and all that lot, many gods, right? Were they wrong? Why should you believe your religion any more than they believe their religion at their time? What makes it? The corruption of man in religion is massive, massive. And even if you want to put all that aside and say, okay, well, this is why I don't totally believe in everything of Christianity or Islam, or as I say, when I talk to you, I'm talking about Christianity, but it applies to all of them. So this is nothing on one religion. Then, you can say that it's all corrupt and, with science, it's exactly the same with religion. And as we have learned using certain things, we're moving slowly away from religion. Not everyone. And what you said was correct before. Religion, if followed certain ways, is a good way to live your life. And that's why I respect religion. Some people need that belief in something bigger. You've got to remember, if a child died many centuries ago, the pain and the grief, or even now, the pain and the grief for people is massive. But when you have a belief of God and heaven and somewhere where that child is going to go, then it gives you some comfort. And also, it's a way to rule people. If you give them, like a lot of religious people will say, what do you base your morals on? What do you mean, what do I base my morals on? I don't need a religion to do that. And if you want to talk about morality, how many morals have priests got who rape children or whatever? They're guided by their religion, and yet they do it. And then there's atheists who have very good morals. So you don't need a religion to guide you through morals either. But you cannot give me no you're saying science is corrupt, but though it has proved a lot and it has done a lot, and look at where we are now, so there are good parts of science, but I believe in something called religion, which I have no explanation of, no evidence of, and then you laugh at me, or not you, like you laugh at someone going, well, that's just ridiculous. Well, isn't the belief in absolutely nothing ridiculous?
Well, I don't know. I mean, first of all, like I said earlier on, I don't necessarily, I'm not one of these like orthodox religionists that thinks that every word in every textbook is absolutely gospel, or, and I know there's a lot of corruption in the churches, there's corruption everywhere, right?
Of course.
And I mean, but for me personally, like it works. Like I have more evidence for me in my own experience that there is a God than there isn't. And I think anyone that opens their mind to it will be able to find that, no problem. And sure, there's corruption everywhere. And we can argue till the cows come home about whether or not some of this stuff is even positive, right? Some of it has been so twisted and is used for cover-ups of, other corruption and all this, crazy stuff. But the reality is I can never unsee God, right? I can never unsee God in my own personal experience. And my life got infinitely better having embraced God. And I think that there's a reason there's a reason that anywhere you go, anywhere around the world, you always find religion, right? There's a reason for that. I think we're just inherently spiritual, and it might not work for everyone. Maybe everyone doesn't choose to believe in it, and that's fine. And again, I'm not, like I said to you many times already, I'm not one of these people that necessarily thinks that only one of them is right, or that every word of every book has to be, taken as it is, or the rules of certain practices have to be the thing, or, one God is better than the other, or the other gods are wrong. It's not really how I see it. But the way I see it is, I do think this universe did not occur by accident. I don't think it occurred by chance. I think this was a deliberately constructed and designed universe that was created by a creator. I believe each one of our souls has a direct connection to that creator. And like I said, I think if you just open your mind to that and try to pray, I think the evidence in my experience and in many people that I know, including many people that I've said this to, that have then later on in life, since having my YouTube channel, reached out to me over Twitter or YouTube and said, I tried this and I can't believe how amazing the experiences were. I've seen this replicated multiple times, many, many, many times. And it seems to work not only for me, but for everyone else that has opened their mind to trying it. And I don't think you need to subscribe to a religion. But I also think there seems to be, at least in my own experience, more evidence for a God than no God. So it's hard for me to get away from that. I don't think I could ever turn my back on God, given the change it made in my life. And yeah, I guess that is what it is.
And that's what I mean, brother. I understand that. And for many people and many different religions, it brings peace. It brings belief. It gives comfort. It gives a lot of things. And I accept that and I understand that. And this is why I respect all religions and I expect everyone's views. But as I say, when we talk about a debate on this sort of subject and you talk about evidence, I'll come back to that in one moment. You talked about religion all over the world. Can you tell me how Christianity was spread to such a vast part of the world?
No, I don't know.
The Christian Crusades, where they killed people, raped people, and forced them into religion. Slavery, where the slaves were basically taught Christianity. This is how it was spread. How was Islam spread, bruv?
I don't know.
The Mughal Empire, who went and raped and killed and pushed their religion onto all areas of the world. And many other empires have done exactly the same. They've pushed their religion. This is why throughout the world you'll find religion. Do you know what I mean? Because it's been pushed from every corner in a violent and aggressive way. And even in the Bible, it said to kill all the heathens. And Islam, it says to kill the non-believers. Do you know what I mean? And that will be attributed to different things. And no, it wasn't meant literally. It wasn't meant like that. Do you know what I mean? But yes, it was. Do you know what I mean? So this is why religion for me is man-made. It is man-made. Now we come to the point of, all right, let's put religion aside, because as you say, you're sort of taking the goodness out of religion as you want to, but your overall belief is in God. Let's push religion out of it and say, okay, let's look at God. And you say the evidence of God. Well, let me put this to you, brother, that a lot of people get faith from certain things and get comfort from certain things. And if you talk, your mind is a very, very powerful thing, right? And if you want to pray and this is your way of your mind expressing that, please God, help my family, take care of it, whatever your prayer may be. And as I say, I respect that. Please believe me, I do, right? It brings you comfort and it brings you change and all that. I have a different way of things. I have positivity, my own self-belief and positivity. So I believe if I'm positive and I constantly thrive to be positive and happy, then everything around me will be positive. And if you're negative, then everything seems negative. So that's my sort of belief. But what actual evidence have you got of God? And it's not your personal experience and all this sort of stuff. That's not evidence. That's not like when we spoke scientifically, you can retest evidence or make tests in science that will repeat themselves. But everyone's experience with God is different. So where's your real evidence of God?
Well, in my own personal experience, I mean, call it faith or belief if you want to call it faith or belief. I mean, you said about keeping a positive mental attitude, and do you think that that influences your reality? And do you think that's belief or faith?
Absolutely.
So is that a faith thing, or would you consider that enough evidence for you to say that I don't want to walk around in a negative mindset because I'll attract more negativity into my life?
So it's not a faith thing, brother. It's in the way of, right? So if I think, let's say I want to plan to do something and I'm negative about it, every brick wall I hit makes me negative. What actually happens to me is I start losing the will to do that thing because I just think it's just not going to work. Oh, mate, I need to get to Scotland and I called a cab and they said it was going to take ages and the trains are on strike and I don't know what to do. Instead of, if I'm positive, I think, okay, the trains are on strike. The cab said it will take ages. Let me look for another solution. And I keep upbeat and I keep going to try and find that solution. And then when you're like that, when you're more and this is a very bad example, I'm just trying to give you a silly example. But when you keep your positivity up, you look for solutions and you find solutions. When you're negative, you give up too easily. Therefore, you won't find the solution. Therefore, the outcome will be negative. Whereas if you're positive and you keep looking, in the end, if you keep pushing, the outcome will be positive. So that's just me in myself and my belief in, look, keep going. Don't give up. Keep going. It's not a faith. It's an attitude. It's my attitude to life.
It sounds very similar to my attitude. It's just I accredit or attribute that to God. It sounds very similar. Like, I don't want to be negative because I believe it will attract more negativity into my life. I want to be positive. But I can't get away from the fact that for whatever reason other people want to choose to believe, that prayer seems to work unbelievably well for me. And giving credit and praise to God seems to work better than trying to say, oh, I did that. That was all me. And in the same way that you want to maintain a positivity towards your life in general and your experiences, I want to maintain a perspective that there is a higher power and that I'm doing this for a reason, right? So, I mean, if you don't want to believe that, I understand. But
no,
I think it's quite a similar. I think it's quite a similar thing, to be honest. Just in the same way that you're sort of focusing your energy and intention and attention on positive things, knowing that you don't want to be banging your head against a wall with negativity. It's kind of a very similar thing for me. It's just I want to focus on that, but I believe there's a creator as well. I believe there's a higher power, and I believe I have access to that higher power as long as I live a moral life and as long as I give credit to my creator. So it's not hugely dissimilar, really.
No, you're right. And I agree with what you're saying. So it's a way, let's say mentally I boost myself by being positive, and mentally you boost yourself by having a belief in God and having a belief in a creator, etc. Now, that still isn't evidence for God or a creator. It's something that gives you strength. Now, you say, I believe, right? If you believe, it means you don't know. Because to believe something, I believe God exists and I believe in the creator, which means you don't know that God exists and you don't know. That word belief is very powerful in what you're saying. There's belief and there's knowing. You believe. Where is your evidence? And that is my point, brother. You don't want to give that up, and I understand that. And I'm not telling you to. I'm not trying to convert you into atheism or something. That's not my goal here. This is a debate just to talk about the two sides of it. And I understand that belief in God is powerful to you and it helps you, and that is why I respect all religions or all faiths in that way. I love Buddhism. I love their way of thinking and all that sort of stuff. But as I said, you believe, but is then real knowing, and it's not a thing to make you say, well,
I wouldn't. I
no, he
wouldn't
doesn't exist.
I wouldn't get too hung up because I use the word belief. Like in my spirit, inside of me, I'm 100% convinced there is a God, and
Right.
I might struggle to be able to convince somebody of that. And what is evidence for me, you might not consider evidence, right? But I can't get away from the fact there is a God. I'm 100% sure. I think it seems far more likely that we live in a constructed universe that was created by a creator. I think that we are, like I said earlier, I think we're all connected to that higher power. And I think we can access this higher power through prayer. And I'm 100% convinced of that. And you can call it belief, you can call it faith, whatever. But there's been many experiences in my life when I haven't known what to do and I pray, and then the answer shows up in crazy forms later, within a few days or a week at the most. And prayer seems to work really, really well for me. Living a religious life seems to work really, really well for me. Although, like I said earlier, I don't really subscribe to like the Orthodox Christianity and the text that much. And yeah, we can call it belief, you can call it faith, whatever. But and I can never probably convey my evidence for God to you, but I have enough evidence to be 100% certain in and of myself.
Yeah, I accept that. I accept that you wouldn't be able to convey it because every person who's religious have their own evidence, let's say, of God for themselves. It's a personal thing, I believe. Now, is God perfect?
Yes.
Did God make a perfect universe?
No. Wait.
Why?
Wait. What do you mean perfect universe?
Well, I mean, if God is perfect and he created something, wouldn't he create it perfect?
Well, no, because I think that I don't like the term heaven, but whatever you want to call it, right? The spirit realm, the plane at which God exists, or the plane, let's call it the realm outside of this physical realm, right? I think that is perfect, whatever is up there. And I think that the reason we are here is to add to perfection. Now, I know that initially sounds like a paradox, but let me explain by using an example of infinity. So if we imagine a pool of numbers, 1, 2, 3, whole numbers, integers, up to, it keeps going forever, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, that's an infinity, up forever.
Yeah.
And if we were to count the units, okay, then we go 1 is 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 3, up to infinity forever. Okay, so that is one pool of infinity, but it is possible to have a larger infinity pool. So if we now say, instead of going whole numbers, integers, we're going to count 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, right? Up to 2, and then, up to 1, and then 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. Now the countable unit is larger. So it's still an infinity pool, but it's larger. It's a larger number of countable units in the same, even though they both go to infinity, right? So I think this is how God works with perfection. I think that everything up there is perfect, God is perfect, but the way he increases the perfection is to split part of him into billions of souls, put them here in this constructed, simulated environment, have them experience a whole heap of different experiences, and then from within here, we learn things like intuition, empathy, and we are able to add to that perfection after we die. That's what I think is the case. That's what I think we're here for.
Okay. All right. Slightly confusing in the way of an infinite number is an infinite number. If you want to fractionalize those numbers, it doesn't increase infinity. It just increases the numbers you count.
No, they both go to infinity, but one has more countable units than the other.
Yeah, just because you're breaking it down into fractionals, right?
Yeah, but if you were to line them up side by the countable units, then one would be bigger than the other because one has more countable units. So even though they both go on to infinity, one is significantly bigger than the other.
If you got an apple and cut it into 10 pieces, that's 10 pieces of the same apple. It's not bigger. It's just been cut into smaller pieces.
Yeah, but if you then line it up against whole apples, where one piece is equal to one countable unit and one whole apple in the other pool is equal to one countable unit, you will have more countable units in the one that's been chopped into 10 pieces.
Yeah, you'd have more countable units, but it will still be taking up the same space. It's just,
No,
the volume of it is the same.
but that's irrelevant because we're not talking about that. We're talking about the number of countable units inside a set of infinity.
Yeah, but I don't see how that's relevant to God, but fair enough.
Because in that same way, because if I just said to you, I think God is perfect, but God puts us here to add to perfection, you would say, well, how can you add to perfection? It's perfect. So
God
you need the
created
countable
us.
units analogy.
God created us.
Yeah.
Did he create anything else out there? We're getting on to aliens with it.
I don't think so, but I don't know.
So,
how could I possibly know?
So then we get a conflict there where, a lot of religious people will say, no, he just formed the earth and he put us on it and we are them. I just think we're very, and please, this is no disrespect again, I think we're very arrogant to think that, God made us in his image, God put us here, it's all about us, God, us, right? The whole universe, billions of galaxies, billions of suns in each galaxy, trillions and billions of planets around all those suns, right? And just us.
Well,
why did he create all the rest? Why didn't he just create our solar system and put us on it?
What's the rest for? I would say if there are others out there, then they seem to have been deliberately put out of our reach.
But the universe is such an expanse; it's so big. Deliberately, why would he deliberately do that? I mean, this is my point, brother. The questions are endless about it, which are not logical. So one minute you say, well, no, I don't believe there's any aliens. We're the only ones, and that's it. What about animals, bruv? Do you believe they have what you would call a soul or intelligence?
Yeah, I certainly think they do. I don't know whether that consciousness is the same level as ours.
Well, we see animals do many things that we would do. We see them cry. We see them care for their dying. We see them care for their young. We see the love between them.
Anyone that's lived with a dog, tell me dogs don't have some level of consciousness, some level of sentience, some level of...
A massive amount.
Right?
Massive amount.
So I have a real... And then when you scale up to these larger animals, like elephants, whales, dolphins, some of these have immense intelligence, memory, ability to learn, ability to read faces of humans, ability to interpret humans are in danger and help them out, ability to ask for help when they themselves need help from a human.
Absolutely. So absolutely.
I don't think that they're just soulless creatures.
So why are we so arrogant when we know there's animals out there probably with the same sort of intelligence? I mean, we can't tell their intelligence because we don't understand them, like dolphins or whales or whatever else, or even monkeys to a certain extent, and pigs have more intelligence than monkeys even. Now, why is it that God made us in his image? Why didn't he? Why isn't a pig or a dolphin or something what God made in his image? Why is it us? Why are we so special? And everything else is at our mercy.
Well, I don't know. I don't have the answers.
But this is my point.
How would I know?
Brother.
How could I know that?
Exactly. Well, this is my point. But in religion, and I accept totally what you've said several times, that you don't believe in all the books and everything and all that lot, and there's falsenesses in them, but you have a belief in God, right? But you look at religion and how it works, and it's basically saying that we are the thing that God put down here, and everything else was for our use, basically. Do you know what I mean? And then we look, and again, I know, again, please understand, I have understood what you said about the Bible, but you look at Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve came from Cain and Abel. Adam and Eve had Cain and Abel, and actually a third son. They actually had 3 sons, correct?
Yeah.
Right. Can I ask you, bruv, to form the rest of humanity, who they had intercourse with to cause the rest of humanity?
Yeah, well, I'm not saying that's... I mean, again, you're kind of asking me these questions as if that's what I think, right? I never really said that, right? I never said that.
Yeah, you have. To be fair, you have. But this is what I'm saying about religion in the context of books and certain things that are said. If you start deeply diving into them, there's so many places it breaks down. But then if you wipe out all religions, then all you're left with is God, the word God.
Guys,
and you have no explanation for it.
Can I just jump in here? Can you just, Cobra, could you just give Camel just a chance when you say, like, you have said it, just let him answer and defend that little bit, and vice versa, if you don't mind. Otherwise, we end up talking over each other.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know what I was going to say. I was going to say, but what? Yeah. So first of all, like I said, I'm not saying necessarily that that makes sense, right? That we all descended from 2, 3, 5 people, whatever it is, right? But at the same time, I have a problem with evolution as well. And again, this is not me saying that, you know, it's all science is corrupted or that it's anti-God or any of that. So please don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. But I'm just kind of saying that we don't really, like, if you have to accept evolution, right? And that it started as, I don't know, tadpoles, and then they grew into fish, and then they grew into they grew legs and walked on land, and eventually, like, they stood upright. But even evolution, we have to acknowledge, if you're going to subscribe to that, which I'm not sure I do, because I'm not sure it makes any sense. But if we're going to subscribe to evolution, then we have to acknowledge there's, like, missing links, right? We still have never found this missing link. It still doesn't really make sense. And we still don't really see evidence for it. Like, you never see further evolution, right? It just seems to have completely halted where it is. And again, I mean, I'm not trying to say that we're all descended from 2 people or whatever. As I said, like, you know, many times I've already mentioned this. And but just as I don't know the answer, or I should say, religion doesn't perhaps have the answer for you, right? But science doesn't really have the answer either. And for me, at least, it seems, again, it kind of seems, it fits in with what I was saying about the Big Bang. For me, it seems more likely that somebody created the universe than the Big Bang theory is correct. It seems more likely there's a creator than a Big Bang. And for the theory of evolution, it doesn't seem to work, right? The more you look into it, the more it doesn't seem to work. And it kind of seems, again, more likely that a creator put us here. That kind of seems, and especially when you look around, okay, like the influence we have on our environment, the things we're able to build, the technology we're able to develop, all of that stuff is not of this world. We don't fit here when you look at every other animal on the planet, right? We don't seem to belong here. So again, for me, it just seems like sometimes the most simple explanation is the most likely. And for me, it seems more likely that a creator put us here than, you know, billions and millions of years ago, we were all just swimming around as a little single cell soup somewhere. That doesn't really sit with me either. So, but to answer your point, like, how do we get to these answers? And none of us really know, right? You have maybe as little evidence for the theory of evolution, assuming that's what you believe, as religion can offer from the religious textbooks.
Right. Okay. So I disagree. You said that we have no evidence of evolution. We absolutely do. And we have evidence of evolution even now, ongoing. So, yes, it takes millions of years to see the evolution and all that sort of stuff in certain things. We have seen the lungfish, which was a fish that created lungs because the area that it was in was drying up, and it had to come onto land, and it developed lungs and can breathe on land. We see viruses, even if you go to the smallest level, that a virus will be there. And then when we develop certain medicines to counter that virus, it will evolve into another virus so that it can be stronger and fight against that. So we absolutely can see evolution. Now, on the scale of going from a single cell amoeba all the way to a human, that takes billions of years. But if you're telling me that evolution, yes, there are flaws in the theory, but
then that's the problem.
Hang on. But it is more likely that there is evolution than to just say something I can't explain made us. You're giving, you know, we are trying to learn, let's say, what has happened, and we are learning and we are showing that evolution does have its merits and there are things we can see. But your answer is something I can't explain made it.
No, not necessarily. It's just I'm not saying no evolution exists, right? Like, of course we could see it in viruses and whatever, but that still doesn't explain us. It doesn't explain us, and it doesn't explain how different we are relative to everything else here. And like I said, there's still this missing link. Oh, we haven't quite solved it. Well, that's in my opinion, as egregious as saying, well, we kind of got the Big Bang Theory figured out, but you just have to give us one assumption. Like, you don't get assumptions. Like, why are we allowed assumptions about science, but we're not allowed to just say, well, I make the assumption this is a constructed universe by a higher power. It kind of seems like a double standard.
Well, no, because we're not asking for one assumption, right? As you said, we have learned about evolution. We have learned certain things, and we can prove to certain amounts evolution, right? Now, just because we haven't found all the answers, go back 2,000 years and we wouldn't have had none of the answers. But we've got to a stage where we have some of the answers, right? But all through the 2,000 years, your thing will be something I can't explain made us. Now, at the end of the day, right, we are learning all the time. And to say about the Big Bang Theory again, and you say, well, I'm just asking for assumption. No, we need time to learn, but we are looking to learn. Whereas religion doesn't allow you to look. You just go, something I can't explain made us. And so I won't look no further. I won't develop myself. I won't increase my intelligence. I won't try and find out the truth. Something I can't explain made us. And then you turn around and say, well, it seems more realistic that something I don't know created the world. A higher being, a creator. Can't explain it. Don't know what it is. But that seems better than evolution, which, yes, I can see it happening in the world. And do you know what, when they say the missing link, do you know what that is?
No.
Well, the missing link is that evolution stated that when one thing forms from when one thing changes into another thing over a period of time, the thing that it changed from dies out, right? So the missing link is, well, if we came from ape, why didn't ape die out, right? That is the whole theory of evolution, all that lot. Well, my answer to that is there are many forms of ape. So the ape that we developed from maybe did die out. And then you say we shouldn't be on this planet, we don't fit in. But if you look at our genetics compared to so many animals and the percentage which is the same between us and ape and so many animals, we actually do fit in here. So you see, bruv, you dispel these things and you just go, well, it doesn't make sense. But then you believe in something which you have nothing about. You can't tell me nothing. You just go, well, it's a higher being. I don't know what it is. But I believe that it makes more sense that something I don't know what it is made everything. But then what you're learning over the last thousands of years and what you've actually looked into and developed and learned about, well, that just sounds ridiculous. Don't make sense, bro.
Yeah, but I mean, you seem to be approaching this of like your purpose of life is to try to understand everything inside this world. Like that's the purpose. Like we need to understand how everything got here, and science needs to save us or whatever. But we might be missing the point completely. Like, what if that's not the point? What if none of this matters? What if none of this even exists in the first place? Right? Like when you zoom in on these elemental particles, there's nothing between them. It's just empty space, right? When you look at where electrons are that hold everything together, they exist as clouds can't speak. They exist as clouds of probability where you're most likely to find them, right? And then when you keep zooming in, what you find is everything is just energy and frequency anyway. So none of this matter is even here. None of this is even here. And we're sort of looking at it as if, oh, well, we need to try to figure out exactly how we evolved. Like maybe that's not even the point, right? Maybe this is a completely artificial construct. And, it doesn't really matter. I mean, if your goal for this experience is to try to solve all of the scientific problems and get a perfect explanation as to why we evolved from a monkey, then I don't really resonate with that. That's not my experience of this life. This life seems to be way more spiritual than that. It doesn't even seem to be a real world. Like I said, the more you zoom into these elemental particles, the more you realize there's nothing between them. And then there's these weird quantum mechanical laws that apply where light can behave as waves and particles at the same time, depending on whether or not a conscious being observes it or not. Right? You can't play tricks on it. It knows when you're observing it, even when you try to pretend like you're not and use camera systems or whatever else. There's quantum entanglement where particles that are spaced infinitely far apart can still affect one another. And then we're going to sit here and pretend like somehow there's no spiritual component to any of this just because the Bible says one thing, or just because, oh, well, we must have evolved from a monkey. And I just think we're kind of like missing the point of it all, right? Like you get kind of annoyed almost that I believe in a higher power, but nothing is even real. Like I said, there's what's holding you together. You're 80-90% empty space. It just seems real because you can reach out and put your hand on your leg and touch it. But all you really are is just energy vibrating at frequency. That's all you really are.
Okay, so you say we're missing the point. I'll get back to that. Please bear with me on this, right? You say, what's the point? Why am I trying to prove this, or why am I trying to look into that? Not me personally, but humanity. Why is it trying to look into it? Because we are a species that questions everything we have developed and everything, how far we've come. has been because we question. I believe that religion stifles that, or the belief in a God that created it. Well, now you've come to the point where you're saying, well, what's the point? Why are we even looking at all this? Why do we care? What's the point? Well, no, it's not that there is a point, and we are that inquisitive. Now, for us to try and develop things like maybe traveling to the moon, maybe whatever it is, you know what I mean, or even traveling across the world, we wouldn't have discovered half the world, let's say from this country or Columbus or anything, wouldn't have discovered any parts of the world if we weren't inquisitive creatures. We're inquisitive.
But
So
why can't we be inquisitive towards God? Why can't we be inquisitive towards there being a spiritual component to science? Why is science got to be the way that they teach us in primary school, which you yourself acknowledge are indoctrination camps, right?
But brother, they teach us religion in primary school. I was sitting there singing hymns. I didn't even believe in Christianity, but I was forced to sit there and sing hymns and be taught about Jesus and all that sort of stuff. Isn't that the same thing? Isn't that an indoctrination? Isn't the fact that you're born into a certain religion indoctrinating you into that religion?
Oh, I don't know. I that's not my experience, but
no, because you have followed it. Whereas I was born into.
No, I mean Hindu... in schools, like most schools don't teach religion, do they? They teach like religious studies, brother, which includes everyone, right? But they don't force religion on.
But hang on, you don't sit in a. I mean, I don't know if they do it now. I'm quite a bit older than the kids going to school now. But back in our day, we would go into school, we'd take the register, we'd go into the hall, and we would sing hymns. Absolutely. We weren't singing, I don't know, Arabic, Islamic songs. We weren't singing Hindu praying songs. We were singing hymns.
But is that just because it was in the UK, though? Like, what if you were in...
Well, absolutely. That's my point. That's my point. That, we are in this country, and so we are you said about schools indoctrinating us with this knowledge. When I talked about indoctrination before, I was talking about the left side of wokeism and all that lot. When we're talking about learning with science and this, that, and that's not necessarily indoctrination, because you are learning and doing the experiments yourself to see how things work, right? Whereas religion, if you want to talk about indoctrination in schools, that works both ways. We were indoctrinated into Christianity. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on heaven as it is on earth. I learned all that. I still remember it now. Why do I? I'm not a Christian. Because I learned it at school. It was indoctrinated into me. So your point?
I can't remember my point, to be honest.
And then the other thing, brother, is, you're saying, why can't we put our energy into believing in God and all that? Because there is nothing. Look, as I say, look, brother, you're talking about, you're not looking for anything, you're not explaining anything. What you're saying, again, as I repeat, is there is an almighty being who created everything. Well, then you don't have to look any further, do you? You don't have to learn anything else, because there's nothing to learn. You've gone, there's this almighty being, that's the point, he created everything.
There might not actually be, that's the thing, there might not actually be anything to learn. We might be learning rules of an artificially created construct. Scientists might be spending their time trying to figure out, like, the speed of light or the force of gravity or the acceleration of whatever. They're spending their time doing that when maybe this isn't even a real world. Maybe this is a completely simulated environment. Maybe we are put here to gain some kind of enlightenment and knowledge pertaining to the spirit, pertaining to a creator, instead of to come here and say, well, I think I evolved from a monkey, right? Maybe that doesn't matter, because maybe the monkeys are simulated as well. Just like when you zoom in on them, there's nothing between them. They're absent space. And when you keep zooming in, they're just vibrating waves of frequency. And there's a very good chance, according to quantum mechanics, that they only exist when you actually cast your conscious vision on top of them. Right? If nobody actually cast any sight over them, then technically speaking, according to the science that you seem to be really, really subscribed to, they don't exist at all. They're not there until consciousness observes them. They can't possibly exist until a conscious being observes them. So I think this whole thing is kind of weird, because it's turned into this attack on religion and almost like a defense of science, as if science is the pinnacle. And you say you're an atheist, but to me, it seems like your religion is science. That seems to be like the thing. You have this same sort of approach to science as I do to God, right? Like, I think, like I was saying, nothing really seems to exist. There seems to be an artificially created construct. That's why this whole positive mental attitude or law of attraction thing, whatever you want to call it, seems to work, because we do seem to have some kind of soul. We do seem to be here for a purpose, and we do seem to be empowered with the ability for our thoughts and consciousness to interface with this simulated environment. So I think that just saying, oh, well, what about this? What about that? What about Adam and Eve? None of this makes sense. Yeah, none of it makes sense, because the whole world is artificially constructed, right? The whole world is just this weird simulated environment. And like, I don't know. It just feels like it feels like a conversation that's never going to go anywhere and never going to end, because we can
Of course it will never end. It's been debated for millennia.
Yeah, and we can
centuries.
constantly attack religions, and we can constantly say, well, that doesn't make sense. Or what about having like underage wives? Or what about this? Or what about beating your wife, like you said? And sure, like none of that stuff really sounds good to me. I don't want it in my home, right? But then again, that doesn't change the fact that I do think there's a massively spiritual component to this existence. I do think that there's a reason our thoughts and our attitude influence our conditions and circumstances. I do think that prayer makes a massive, massive difference. And I do think that even you acknowledge that positive mental attitude makes a massive difference. Like I was saying, the more you zoom in, the more you realize nothing even exists anyway. Matter is just this illusion. It's all light and frequency.
I don't agree with that bit either. I don't agree with that.
Can I just butt in here, guys? Because I can't, as entertaining as this is, I can't believe an hour and a half's gone already.
Oh my God.
It's amazing. Right. I've got a question for both of you, but I just want Cobra just to answer that point. Yeah, and then I'm going to ask you both a question.
Okay. Well, in response to your point, it's not an attack on religion, brother. It's, you see, religion, I believe, is man-made anyway. The point when you say, well, what's the point of us looking into all this lot and blah, 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 there's a God and all this, and this is all fake, and it's a simulated world, and even us, we're not physical. No, I don't agree, bruv. What you're doing is saying, as you zoom in, you see the atoms and there's space in between them, but the atoms exist, so there is something physical. You're just dispelling the whole point that we exist and all that, and it's simulated world. We're going into conspiracy theory on that. There's no evidence for anything.
No, it's not. This is quantum physics. This is quantum physics. This isn't up for debate. This isn't conspiracy. This is literally the whole point, right? Like I have a chemistry degree, so I know what I'm talking about here. This is the bit I'm 100% certain of, right?
Okay.
I used to do this at university. We used to calculate things like the spin on the electron, how they bond with other atoms, how they hold things together. The majority of it is there's a little bit of mass, and the majority of it is just vibrational frequency, right? There's nothing there. It's completely, and like I said, then there's the rules of quantum mechanics that say that until you really observe it, it exists in a probability cloud. And this is real. This isn't like the conspiracy part.
No, but you just said there is mass. Yeah, whether there's a little bit of mass and a lot of open space, or whether there's more mass, there is mass. So you can't say we don't exist in that way. We have mass. Atoms are mass. Yeah, they may be in an environment which is floating, but they are mass. Therefore, they exist. And we can keep going on and going, well, this is a simulated world. It could be this, it could be that. But then let me ask you something. You said, why are we even looking into this when we can just believe in God? But, this is the point. We keep developing and learning and pushing ourselves to learn. Whereas God, just to believe in God will just wipe all that out. It's finished. I believe in God. That's it. I don't need to look at anything else. But then we wouldn't have even got this far. We'd still be in the Stone Age if we believed that. Because we just would have gone, well, there's God and he does everything and he's almighty and so I don't need nothing else.
Well, maybe you don't know. Maybe you just need to develop.
Yeah, we do.
Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the point.
I want to.
What you want?
Well, not me, but man wants to. We want to learn. We want to develop. Otherwise, we'd still be praying to a volcano and we'd still be praying to thunder and lightning. Because that was God at one point. So haven't we come forward from then? Do we just sit back now and go, well, there's a God, so I ain't doing nothing. I don't need to learn nothing else.
Yeah, but I mean, you are. That's not exactly what I said, is it? That's like I didn't say.
It's basically what you're saying, brother.
It's not, though, is it? It's not.
Well, what are you saying?
What I'm saying is we might be missing the point. Like, it's not necessarily about finding the force of gravity or developing the next iPhone or like.
Okay, what is the point?
I think it might be about taking a fragment of God, which is your soul, and using it somehow to develop to a higher power, a higher entity, a godhead, right? A centralized force. Like that's what I think it's about. I think that's far more likely, and I don't
Okay,
really think the rest of it matters. I don't think the rest of it is, like we can sit here and debate the Adam and Eve thing or whatever else all day, and I don't really think that matters. I think at some point we're going to die. And
Okay,
then the
may I
question
give
becomes,
you?
are you gonna go somewhere, or do you just rot in the ground, right? And if you believe you rot in the ground, you believe, like, no one knows, right? We're all gonna get to find out one day, and
Absolutely.
most people are probably going to be wrong, whether that is wrong because they find out there is a heaven or some equivalent of an afterlife or whatever, and a judgment, or whether that is that everyone that lives that way is just going to be dead wrong because they're just going to get suddenly the lights go out, it goes black, and you get buried in the ground and no one cares, right? It's as if you were never here. But
May I give you another way of thinking of it?
yeah,
My
sure.
way of thinking of it. So I don't believe that when you're dead in that way. But we know that energy can't be dispelled. There's a constant universal energy. You can't create it. You can't dispel it. It goes from one form to another. Correct?
Yes.
Right. Potential, kinetic, heat, light, etc. Right. Five different forms of energy.
Yeah.
So there is one universal energy which is constant. Now, we also know that in our bodies, electrical energy is sent from our brain to our body to move, to think, we have electrical energy, correct?
Yes. Like, well,
So there is energy within our
neurotransmitters.
body.
Neurotransmitters is what you mean,
Yes,
right?
yes, but they send electrical signals.
Okay. Yeah.
So there is energy within us, right? We eat food to get energy, right?
Yeah.
Right? So there is energy in us. So when we die, that energy must carry on. It must be a constant, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we have come to the point where we've said our body is a shell, let's say, and there is an energy within us. Now, you may call that a soul. I may just call that energy. Okay. Now, that energy goes back into the universe, the universal energy. And when something else is born, whether it be an animal, a man, or whatever, energy must be taken out of the universe to go into that creation, or really at conception.
Yeah.
Right? The energy will go in it. So I believe, my personal belief in this way is, yes, when we die, our body will rot and die, and that's the end of that. But our energy, whether it carries intelligence or not, is a different matter. Whether it carries a soul, as we say, or what we had in our mind and goes into the universal energy, that I do not know. And I'm quite happy to say I do not know. But I do know for sure that the energy within our body will carry on existing in the universal energy, because that has to be a constant.
Weirdly enough, it's got a weight. Did you know that?
Yes, I had heard that.
If you weigh people just after they die,
actually, yes, actually, that test was falsified. I know exactly what you're talking about. So they measured the weight of the body, and then they measured the weight of the body afterwards. But it was shown that wasn't actually true.
Okay.
I can get back to you on that exact thing, but I did look into that quite deeply at one point.
I know in the hospital when someone dies, they typically open a window as well. You know about this?
No, but is that just?
It's quite common. The nurses will open a window because they can feel it like leave. Apparently, even the people that aren't that spiritual, it's like a common practice.
And as I say, bruv, there's a lot we don't understand. But what I can't do, and I'm not telling you that you shouldn't do, I'm just saying what I can't do is, because I don't understand that at the moment, and I may never, we might not learn that by the time I die. In fact, we probably won't, right? I can't attribute it to something else I don't understand or I don't know. Do you get where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I completely understand.
I would rather learn to, humanity may learn that there is a God. But my point is, I can't believe in something I have zero evidence of and just go, yes, there's a creator. I can't do it.
Yeah, I understand that. But I mean, have you ever tried to be open to it? Have you tried and then
just
present it?
I was open to it. So as a kid, I was raised as a Hindu/Sikh because my dad was Hindu, my mum was Sikh. And we prayed every Friday. Okay. And my dad had a little temple in the house, set up on shelves with gods and effigies and all that sort of stuff. And I had to pray all the time. And it got to a point where I felt I didn't agree with this. I didn't like it. It didn't make sense to me. And so I went to my dad and I said, I don't want to pray every Friday. He turned around and said to me, you have to pray every Friday until you can come to me with a reason why you don't believe in it. That's when I went off And for a period of 2 or 3 years, I looked into different religions, different things, and I wanted to really get all the information I could. This is why I do have an affinity to Buddhism, because I looked into that as well. And I went back to him with a 14-page project called The Hand of God, The Hand of Man, or, oh, what was it? The Hand of God, or hand made by man, right? And in it, it broke down several religions. It broke down reasons why they don't fit, why my understanding of it don't make sense, and all that sort of stuff. He read the whole thing, and then he turned around and said, "Son, you've looked into it. You look for yourself, and this is what you've come up with." And it was a really good project. I still got it somewhere, and he said, "You don't have to pray no more." So yes, brother, it hasn't been that I've always been, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God and all that lot. I was brought up with a religion, and I looked into it, and it didn't make sense. There was no evidence for any of it. And therefore I came away from it.
It's quite similar to my story. I was raised as a Christian, and by about age, I don't know, 10, 11, I started to question it when my mum was like, well, no, you have to go at first. And I kept questioning it, and then she said, no, you gotta go. You gotta go to church. We go to church every Sunday. I want you to pray, blah, blah, blah. And then by about age 12, she said, you know what? You're 12 years old. You can make your own decision. Like, I don't want to force this on you. So at that point, about 12, I just completely slid away from it. I was embraced atheism, and it didn't occur to me until much, much, much later in life. But yeah, it's kind of interesting that it's almost like a very similar path to you, but I just happened to go back
to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as I say, brother, I don't, I'm not telling you you're wrong. I will never do that, because look, I'm not sitting here as a 50-year-old geezer who's lived most of his life running around, running businesses, fighting and doing all sorts, right? I will never turn around and profess to know that I'm a scholar of this and I know everything. I cannot do that. But I will question things, bro. And not so much with you, but I was talking to a Muslim the other day, and we were having a very similar debate about religion and all that. In fact, what happened was, we were on a security job. There was two guys there, and they were Christians, and he was Muslim. And he started telling them how wrong they were and how everything was wrong about Christianity, and it don't make sense, and Islam is the way, and all the rest of it. And he was doing it in a way to try and make them see that their religion was wrong and he was right. And so I went over and I said, well, I'm an atheist. And we got into a massive debate. Well, then I put some points to him that he could not answer. And he goes, well, that just don't make sense. I went, answer the question. He goes, I can't answer the question. I went, why not? He goes, because that will put doubt on my religion. So it had made him think that hard. He goes, that would put doubt on my religion, and I'm not allowed to have doubt in my religion. And this is my point, brother, that sometimes religion will actually close you off to every other possibility, because you are so into your religion. And I'm not saying you, but I'm saying, like with this guy, so into your religion, you will not allow yourself to see anything else, because it will go against your belief. And that to me is fanatical. And then you actually don't learn. And this is where religion falls down. It stops you from learning. It tells you this is the way, this is the only way, and this is the way you must follow. Therefore, don't look at anything else. And if we had all done that, then we would not, as a human race, or as humanity, sorry, we would not be where we are today. And we won't go any further than what we are today.
Yeah, I do see your point completely. I do see your point. But I also think the issue is there's a component to each person's religion where, or at least their relationship with God or whatever it is. And everyone's is kind of different. It's a very individualized thing. So you will have some people that were just brought up this way, right? Oh, my parents are, XYZ religion, and thus I was raised that way. And they maybe never question it. Right? They just, oh, well, this is my routine. I wake up, I pray. If I'm a Muslim, I pray 5 times a day, whatever it is, right? And maybe they never even stop to think. That's just the way they're brought up. They never question it, whatever. Then there'll be other people that, question it halfway through and then maybe make a decision or whatever. But I think the issue is when we're having these kind of debates, it's very easy for someone in an atheist position to say, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, what about this? And of course, I can't answer most of these questions. I'm like, well, I don't know. Right. But it's super hard to convey that it's a very individualized thing. And like I said to you earlier, like I can't get away from my experiences, my own personal experiences. And I know plenty of people that have had similar experiences. And I certainly think that if if people just open their mind to it a little bit, then it definitely seems to be a much more individual thing, and it definitely seems to be more inviting. But it is really hard to. It seems easier to defend the atheism point because we're used to sort of arguing in logic, but it doesn't take into account that much of what we experience or can experience is a highly spiritual component of this world, right? And so it's like it's a really tough one, but I think that's the most challenging part is conveying your own personal experience with it.
I absolutely agree with you. I do believe that your personal belief, and this is why this isn't a conversation of trying to prove you wrong. That's not what I'm trying to do here. But I do believe you're absolutely right that every individual person has their own experience, who's religious, say, has their own experience with God or their own spiritual experience, and that is valid. It is absolutely valid. And this is why I said to you, I do respect all religions, all beliefs in God and all that lot, because for that person, it is totally valid. And so I agree with you that, and you must carry on because that is how you get comfort. It's what you believe in, and it gives you your explanation that you need. For me personally, right? I cannot believe in something that I have literally no evidence of and literally no explanation. And when you say if you open yourself to it, but in the same way, I could say to you, well, if you open yourself up to the development and learning through science, or you don't even have to call it science, but the development and learning through our inquisity, our the way we are, that we question things. And I believe you must question. And if you come to the same conclusion after your questions, bro, then all good for you. But I don't believe we should never question it. If
Yeah,
we don't question, we cannot learn.
actually, I completely agree with you. And both me and my wife were incredibly skeptical initially, incredibly skeptical. And had we have had that skepticism, had we have had that skepticism,
We've got another word.
yeah, had we have had that skepticism and it been met with none of our own experiences, or had I have prayed every day for weeks and weeks and weeks and had no signs whatsoever, right? Then I would have probably also reached the conclusion that this doesn't work. But
Mm.
but that's just not my experience. That is not my experience at all.
And
And
your experience is valid, bruv. I'm not, please, as I said to you in the beginning, I'm not, this is not a personal argument, or it's not an argument at all. It's a debate on two sides and two opinions. And I think they are very important, these sort of debates. And again, brother, great scholars and highly intelligent scientists have had this debate for centuries. We're not the first to sit here and talk about this subject, and we will not be the last.
yeah,
It's
true.
gone on for centuries, and it will go on for centuries more. And I will never say you're wrong and I'm right. And you should not be able to say, well, you're wrong and I'm right. We don't know. We are learning constantly. But as long as we keep learning, that's the important thing.
Well, guys, what can I say? I've been very
That-
quiet.
We haven't.
Can I say this is probably will go down in history as the podcast with the most words said?
I think it was an incredible conversation. I have, again, thoroughly enjoyed that. Thoroughly enjoyed that debate.
I'm going to ask you both a question,
Mm.
just to spill off the last 10 minutes or so. And I'm going to go to you. I'll both ask you the same question. And I'm going to ask you, Cobra, what is your purpose in life?
My purpose in life is to help people, to live my life by good morals, to develop myself, to improve myself, and to make sure I can help to improve others or give them aid to help them to improve themselves. And for me, that is my goal, that my life should be good, clean, and decent to all my fellow people.
Cool. Camel,
was the question, what's the purpose?
what's your purpose in life?
My purpose. I'm just passing through. That's what I think. I'm just passing through. And I've had some good experiences, I've had some bad experiences, and I don't know. I honestly feel like I am pushed by God and guided by God, and I just kind of I feel like I'm passing through this world, and at some point I'll leave this place and go somewhere else. So yeah, I don't know.
Still figuring it out.
Yeah, I don't really think too much on it. I try to just live day to day. I try to live a good moral life. I try to pray a lot, give glory to God, and that's just how I live. Yeah, I don't really think too much on it. I do think that we're probably here to try to learn and have experiences and develop things like empathy and intuition. And like I said, I think I'm just passing through. I don't really believe this world is a real world. I don't really believe it's the physical realm so much. I think it's more of an artificial construct. And like I said, I think I'm just passing through. I've always looked at it that way.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Cobra Stacker, tell us what you want to tell us about your channel.
Well, guys, I hope a lot of you have seen my channel. If you haven't, please go to YouTube. It's Cobra Stacker. And on that, I will show you silver and gold bullion and proof coins and collectible items from all over the world. And every Friday, 7 p.m. on my channel, I go live with an auction where I sell silver and gold from all over the world.
Cool. Thank you. And we can find you on YouTube only.
Cobra Stacker YouTube. I'm looking at doing maybe a bit of Instagram, TikTok, and all that, but at the moment, time is not on my side.
Bless you. Camel, where can we find you, dude?
You can find me on YouTube, Camel Finance, and on Twitter as well. And that's it for now.
Well, that sounds like the end of the news. That's it for now.
That's it for now.
I've got some stuff in the pipeline I'm working on, but only
wicked.
those two platforms for now, at least.
Wicked. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. That's been fascinating. Absolutely fascinating to listen to and observe. That's for sure. Guys, this will all be out tomorrow at 2:00 and also on Spotify, which is really cool.
Amazing. Well done. Well done.
On Spotify as well. So thank you very much, gents. It's been an absolute brilliant almost 2 hours. Thank you very much. See you next time.
Camel, thank you very much, brother. I thoroughly enjoyed this. And CPM, thank you, bro.
Yep. Thanks, Cobra. I appreciate it, mate. And yeah, thanks, CPM, for having us.
No problem at all. Take care. Love you both. Bye.